I love you. How are you doing today? Hope you're having a good day. And yeah, today we're in John chapter 9. It's a shorter story, but nevertheless, it is an important story because obviously it's in the Bible. Everything in the Bible is important. And I'm going to read chapter 9, and then I'm also going to read some notes from I have a study Bible, so there's notes at the bottom of the study Bible because there's some history behind some of the verses, and believe it or not, I don't know all the answers. I know it's crazy. I'm human. I don't know all the answers. I'm not perfect. So that's why it's nice to have a study Bible, because scholars and people who study the Bible have already done the research for us. And so that's how we have study Bibles, and we have little side notes that helps us break down what we read for understanding and context. It's important to read the Bible with context. Do not take anything out of context. That's very dangerous to do. So that being said, let's hop into John chapter 9, starting at verse 1. As he went along, he saw a blind man from birth. His disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" "Neither this man nor his parents sinned," said Jesus, "but this happened so that the works of God might be displayed in him. As long as it is day, we must do works of him who sent me. Night is coming when no one can work. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world." So I'm gonna stop right there. Just in case you missed that, his disciples saw this blind man who was blind from birth and automatically jumped to the conclusion that maybe he sinned or his parents had sinned, and Jesus says neither. And this is what my study Bible says at the bottom. It says, "A common belief in the Jewish culture was that calamity or suffering was a result of some great sin, but Jesus used a man's suffering to teach about faith and glorify God. We live in a fallen world where good behavior is not always rewarded and bad behavior is not always punished. Therefore, innocent people sometimes suffer. If God took suffering away whenever we asked, we would follow him for comfort and convenience, not out of love and devotion. Regardless of the reasons for our suffering, Jesus has the power to help us deal with it. When we suffer from a disease, tragedy, or disability, try not to ask, "Why did it happen to me?" or "What did I do wrong?" Instead, ask God to give you strength for the trial and a clearer perspective on what is happening. So obviously, this world is not perfect, and it's just not perfect. So never blame God for shortcomings in life, or say, "Why do good things happen to bad people?" Or and then why do bad things happen to good people? I'm gonna stop you right there. Now you put that in the world that there's good people and there's bad people. In reality, we're all bad in some certain way because we all sin, we all fall short of the glory of God. And so whenever something does happen, pray to God, have him lift you up, and know you're never alone in this world. Find somebody to talk to when something bad happens, and keep God first no matter what, and you will get through your shortcomings in this world, whatever they may be. Now we'll continue in verse 6. It says, "After saying this, he spit on the ground, made some mud with saliva, and put it on the man's eyes. 'Go,' he told him, 'wash in the pool of Siloam.' This word means sent. So the man went and washed and came home seeing. His neighbors and those who had formerly seen him begging asked, 'Isn't this the same man who used to sit and beg?' Some claimed that he was. Others said, 'No, he only looks like him.' But he himself insisted, 'I'm the man.' 'How then were your eyes opened?' they asked. He replied, 'The man they call Jesus made some mud and put it on my eyes. He told me to go to Siloam and wash. So I went and washed, and then I could see.' 'Where is this man?' they asked. 'I don't know,' he said." So Jesus spit in the mud, put mud on this guy's eyes, and then said, "Go, wash them off." And the pool of Siloam, that is a place in Jerusalem. You can do your research on that, look it up. Because once again, the Bible is a history book. This is not just some made up story that someone just threw on a page. This is all history, and the Bible mentions a lot of places which you can go and look up. And it's just cool to learn about history. So never forget that the Bible is a history book and not just some story or some fairy tale. So I'm going to continue. In verse 13 it says, they brought this to the Pharisees, the man who had been blind. Now the day of which Jesus had made the mud and opened the man's eyes was Sabbath. Therefore the Pharisees also asked him how he received his sight. He put mud on my eyes, the man replied, and I washed, and now I can see. Some of the Pharisees said, this man is not from God. He does not keep the Sabbath. But others asked, how can a sinner perform such signs? So they were divided. They turned again to the blind man. What have you to say about him? It was your eyes he opened. The man replied, he is a prophet. They still did not believe that he had been blind and received his sight until they sent for the man's parents. Is this your son? They asked. Is this the one you say he was born blind? How is it that he can now see? We know our son is blind, the parents answered, and we know he was born blind. But how can he see now? Or who opened his eyes? We don't know. Ask him. He is of age. He will speak for himself. His parents said this because they were afraid of the Jewish leaders who already had decided that anyone who acknowledges that Jesus was the Messiah would be put out of the synagogue. That is why his parents said he is of age. So I'm going to read some notes from my Bible once again towards the bottom for chapter 9, verse 14 through 16. It says, the Jewish Sabbath, Saturday, was weekly holy day of rest. The Pharisees had made a long list of specific do's and don'ts regarding the Sabbath. Kneading the mud and healing the man were considered work, therefore were forbidden. Jesus could have merely spoken and brought healing as he had at other times, but he may purposely made the clay in order to emphasize his teachings about the Sabbath, that caring for others' needs is always right, even if it involves working on the day of rest. So, just like we learned earlier in John, these Pharisees basically made up their own laws about Sabbath by taking God's words out of context, so again, I said that's a dangerous thing. And so this is a common theme that Jesus does. He quote unquote works on the Sabbath by helping people, because just like this says, that caring for others' needs is always right, even if it involves working the day of rest. Always put other people above yourself, because that's what Jesus would do. What would Jesus do? Jesus takes care of people. Lift people up. Be nice to people. Take care of people. You don't know their life story. You don't know all that. Just pick people up. Share the love of Christ with others. Now I'm going to continue in verse 26. It said, a second time they summoned the man who had been blind. Give glory to God by telling the truth. They said, we know this man is a sinner. He replied, whether he's a sinner or not, I don't know. One thing I do know, I was blind, but now I see. Then they asked, what did he do? How did he open your eyes? He answered, I have told you already, and you do not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you want to become his disciples too? Then they hurled insults at him and said, you are his fellow disciple? We are the disciples of Moses. We know that God spoke to Moses, but as for this follow, we don't know where he comes from. The man answered, now that is remarkable. You don't know where he comes from, yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners. He listens to godly persons who does his wills. Nobody has ever heard of opening the eyes of a man born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing. To this they replied, you are steeped in sin at birth. How dare you lecture us? And they threw him out. So like I talked about in chapter 8, the world's going to hate the truth. If you spread the truth, they're going to hate it. These Pharisees hurled insults at him just by this man merely telling them the truth. Hey, if Jesus is not from God, how did he perform this miracle? He just asked that simple question. And the Pharisees took offense of that because they were living for lies and not for the truth. They did not want to hear the truth. That's why they lashed out. You're going to find out it is very common for people to lash out once you tell them the truth because they don't want to admit that they are wrong. Now I'm continuing verse 35. It says, Jesus heard that they had thrown him out, and when he found him, he said, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" "Who is he, sir?" The man asked. "Tell me so that I may believe in him." Jesus said, "You have now seen him. In fact, he is speaking with you." The man said, Lord, I believe you. Lord, I believe. And he worshipped him. Jesus said, "For judgment I come into this world, so that the blind will see, and those who will see become blind." Some Pharisees who were with him heard him say this, and they asked, "What are we blind to?" Jesus said, "If you were blind, you would not be guilty of sin. But now that you claim you can see, your guilt remains." So that's how chapter 9 ends. And when Jesus was calling the people who see blind, he's basically saying, you guys know the Bible. You guys know about God. You guys are seeing my signs, and yet you still reject me, and you still sin. Therefore, you are blind of faith. Do not be blind of faith, because if you know the words of Jesus and then you purposely go against those, you are being blind, and you will be judged for that. That is a dangerous thing to do. But if you don't know who Jesus is, and so you're quote unquote blind, like you have that blind faith because you never got a chance to have a relationship with Jesus, he will open your eyes so you're not blind no more. You can see. Once you start seeing the works of Jesus, you're no longer blind until the fact that you try to quote unquote be blind because you want to follow the world and stuff. And yeah, that's what chapter 9 is. It's just Jesus healing a blind man. And basically, the whole moral I got of that story is stop being blind in faith. Open your eyes towards Jesus. And always help people out, just like Jesus did. I love you guys. Subscribe, share, all that jazz. Have a good day.